voice. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest friend, but wholly trust in Jesus' name. Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's love. Through the storm, He is Lord, Lord of all. When darkness seems to hide His face.
Yeah. Hey there, friends. Sorry for the technical difficulties. We really do hope that we don't have any more issues. We're going to be looking at one camera, right, at you in your living room or wherever you're at right now, and we're talking foundations. And today we're going to talk about parenting. And so we have Brent Estes, who's a licensed marriage family therapist here in the area. Betsy, who's worked with the kids ministry forever, and I'm Ben. I've been a youth pastor, and I got kids of my own. But real quick introduction. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Brent.
Well, as you said, I'm a marriage, family, child counselor, a marriage, family therapist. Used to be with the child in it. The state of California changed the license years ago. Work a lot with kids and have been. I've been in the area now almost 25 years. Before that, 5 years down in Southern California, Orange County and LA County, working a lot with kids, families, and parents. And I enjoy it, but it's been a gazillion folks. These are unique times, so we'll talk more about that.
Thank you. Betsy, what about yourself?
Yeah, well, I have 3 kids. So one adult that lives out of the state, and then a college student who's living at home, and a 16-year-old. And I was the kids director at this church for 19 years, so worked with a lot of kids over the years.
Yeah. Yep. And we got kids 8, 11, and 14, so we got kids all over the spectrum as well. And I've been, as a youth pastor forever, worked with lots of high school, college, junior high kids. Yeah, and these are really difficult times. And so really the point of this is, parenting through a pandemic. We know that parenting is a challenge. It's also amazing in itself, but especially during these times, these are extra disorienting for everyone. So we're going to take about 30 minutes or so, 30, 40 minutes, and have a dialogue. And our hope is that you would glean something, and I hope it's interesting to you, because we're going to talk like we are interested. We really are interested in what we're talking about. And then we'll have some time for Q&A. So want to tell us how that works?
Yeah, so there's a chat on here, and so several of you have already been putting in your ages of your kids, and that's helpful for us as we go through the discussion. But as we go along, if you've got questions that you would like us to answer, we'll try to kind of put them into groups and try to get through some of those at the end. And yeah, so just use the chat for that. And you don't have to log in. It might ask you to sign up or log in. Just click the X on that. If you want to actually engage in the chat, I think you have to log in at some point to put in the chat. But yeah,
Great.
We'll keep going.
Great. Well, we'll jump right in. So, Brent, as a therapist, you've been doing this for 30 years, correct?
Pretty close.
Yeah, close to 30 years. What are you seeing right now in your practice and amongst peers in our world? I know we're dealing with anxiety, depression. Some kids are having suicidal thoughts. There's disorientation, identity crisis. Kids have lost everything. How would you help us make sense of what we're seeing and what we're going through as parents?
Such a big question.
It is.
Something I failed to mention in my intro is I'm a parent as well. I have 2 kids. I have a freshman in college, and I have a junior in high school.
Okay.
And we're all on top of each other in our house as well.
Right.
So I think right now it's just that. We're bumping into each other. Nobody signed up for this.
Right.
And in fact, the kids that I see in my office, I tell them constantly, This is something you will never, ever forget. And I think for parenting now more than ever, it's messy. It is definitely messy. And as a Christian, I think what's so neat is just to know in the messiness God is at work. And there's a lot of grace in the messy. And our kids are looking to us now more than ever. The younger ones, I think, lean in on us as parents. Just like, is everything okay? I was telling Ben earlier, and Betsy, just having a kiddo in my office at the beginning of this pandemic, and he was over playing with some Star Wars figures across the room, and he stopped, and everyone stopped, and he said, "Mom, are you scared?" And the whole office just kind of got sucked into that energy, and I think that was the message, is like, we're going to be okay. I need to look to you as a secure attachment right now to make sure. And then as our kids grow a little bit further into the developmental ages and stages, it takes on a different shape. It takes on a different form. But these are difficult times, and it's okay not to be okay as parents right now. I think we're all in it together. And I was just even reading some parenting stuff from the BBC, and just seeing how they're handling things over in Great Britain as parents. And there was this fun little graphic that showed what's most important in these times from their perspective. And their graphic is just foundationally just that reassurance that we're all in it together. And relationship is most important. And I think as Christians, I would add to the graphic just the foundation, kind of the name of tonight, foundation of faith, and just holding on to that. And I think our kids are going to look to how we handle these crises, these difficult times. And then further in their graphic for the BBC, they showed school, and it was kind of further up the top on the roof. Just kind of like, what is most important, and how do we want to look at this right now, and how do we want to frame this time?
Right.
So these are difficult days, and the whole world is dealing with it. I think sometimes we just think it's us, but it's worldwide.
Right. And so for so many of these kids, especially the older ones, is a huge loss, right? A year ago, they were on sports teams, or they knew that they were looking forward to graduation or whatever it is, and they're experiencing so much loss. And parents, we're figuring out how do we help our kids go
through that loss.
Yeah, how do we go through this with them?
Yeah, I would say change is loss, and they're just a multiple mini deaths, other than the deaths of actual people and family members and relatives that unfortunately have passed because of COVID or other incidents and accidents. And sometimes it triggers other losses, as some of these kids have been through. If parents have been divorced, that's another loss, or other changes. Some kids are just constantly dealing with disappointment, something else being canceled, like you were alluding to, sports activities that aren't happening, or not being able to. Some kids are in school, but some in the area, Lucia Mar here, and other districts that are just not meeting. So some kids, I've discovered this the other day and thought about it, some kids have never finished their last day of school. Some kids haven't even started their first day of school yet. And it is just actually in-person school. And it's just kind of interesting. Some kids still haven't finished their last year school of being able to say goodbye or saying hello to new teachers and new friends in person.
Right.
And so it's constantly loss, kind of looking at stages of grief. They're grieving. Right now, I think there is such a, to kind of go back to your earlier question, I think we're all going through a sense of heaviness and weariness right now. People are tired, not knowing, as you think about Super Bowl coming this week, not knowing if we're in the first quarter, the halftime, third quarter, or are we getting close to the end of the game? And it's just constantly questioning, where are we in this process? When is this going to end? When do we crawl out of this cave?
Right.
And I have kids coming in and telling me I feel trapped. I feel like I'm a prisoner. And there's just a sense of heaviness some days for them.
Yeah.
And you're right. I think there is an awareness of loss, awareness of sadness, awareness of anxiety. Some folks are dealing with almost like post-traumatic stress,
Right.
where their own mortality is having to be looked at, and they're having a hard time sleeping, and there is anxiety that it falls under kind of the umbrella of anxiety for a lot of these kids.
So if you have a kid that is anxious,
Yeah.
Whatever the age is, I mean, it might manifest differently,
Right.
I'm sure it does in different stages. But as a parent, what are some best practices to walk with a kid, your own kid, that is dealing with depression, anxiety? How do you know when to bring them in to see a therapist, or what's normal? Is there a normal?
Yeah, good question. I think we're dealing with a new normal. I hate the phrase, but I think it works here. There is a new normal. We're all learning. I think if it gets to a point where, for some kids, if it becomes they're paralyzed and they can't move forward, can't move backwards, and they're just stuck, and probably lots of tears, a lot of overwhelming emotions where they are not being able to do school. They're just completely shutting down for a prolonged period of time. Probably that would probably be a need for somebody to, for you to go to your pediatrician or to explore some options. I think, I help parents, and I think so much of it is us as parents also being aware of our own stuff. Right. How we're doing with anxiety during this time. Are we going to be okay? Kids, like I said earlier, watch us. I think of like the old cassette players or a DVD player where you have multiple buttons as to which to push. You have the pause button, you have a play button, you have a fast forward, you have a rewind, and you have a stop. I think I said those. Yeah. During this time, especially as parents, and I also try to help parents teach their kids, is like, we only need to be able to push 2 buttons. It's push play for today, and that's where we're at. Let's focus on this. Getting through the day, we're going to be okay. With God's help, we're going to look at what's most important for right now.
So do you actually say that to the kid?
Yeah, yeah.
So if you're talking, I'm your child, and I'm melting down, what?
Oh, good question. Yeah. What do you do? I think in some ways is also getting eye contact.
Okay.
Just being able to get the anchor of their body and just make sure, sometimes I would even, depending on the age of the kid, it gets a little interesting when the kids are bigger than us, but just almost even dropping a knee, just trying to get down with them and just reassuring that they're going to be okay. And just like, let's breathe. Let's just kind of watch my breathing. Let's breathe. Let's work through this. We're going to make it. Let's take a minute here to get our composure. Sometimes it gets a little daunting with some of the expectations of if it's a teacher, and I don't know, I don't want to mess up, or I need to get this right, or I need to make sure that I did the right assignment at the right time, or I didn't do this, I didn't get the information, and there's just a sense of panic. So just kind of making sure that reassurance, that it's going to be okay, I've got your back. I'm coming alongside you right now. Proverbs 22:6 talks about train up a child in the way he should go. And I think so much of our training is teaching and encouraging and coming alongside and being their support. And then also leading from the front. Obviously they look to our example, coming alongside, and then sometimes pushing. Like, okay, come on, let's get going.
Right.
Being the motivator.
Right.
Yeah.
And the motivator is really hard when you're at home and you're the teacher or the TA and you're the parent.
Yeah.
And you might have a job on top of that. And so, we talked about this a little earlier, but how do you differentiate? I think that a lot of stress, what we felt, and I know that a lot of our friends have felt, is that, you're trying to get your kids' work done. They're shutting down. You have errands to do. You got to get groceries, whatever. You got a business call in an hour. You got a deadline. And then you start spiraling.
Yeah.
And how do you differentiate between like mom right now, or I'm the teacher right now, or I need alone time? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, there's so much to that. I think the thought would be for the younger ones is that you're allowing, and so many of these kids are on screens at a certain time. They have to log on, they have to be in. Some districts are doing that you have to log in at 9 and then you have to, take a little break and then log back in. Everyone has different time. And I think it gets even more challenging when, depending on the school the kid is on, like there could be kids from multiple schools needing to log on at different times. So you're right, it is kind of a conductor, like, okay, wait, you didn't log in, or what?
Yeah, all of a sudden you're the tech person too.
Absolutely.
Internet drops, right.
Yeah, so I think I ultimately, back to the premise of it's messy.
Right.
And we're going to be okay. And I think as parents, giving yourself permission, it's okay if it doesn't work like clockwork, or if things fall apart. And then I think reassuring our kids, we're going to be okay. It's going to be fine. And some kids, I mean, as they get a little bit older, they're not necessarily wanting to get out of bed and log in. And so it really just depends. I think for the elementary school teachers that I know, they're dealing with all these bright, shiny faces that have logged in and turned on their screens. And then as we get into middle school and high school, there's more screens that are turned off. And I think it's kind of, a lot of our students right now are turning off on so many different levels.
Yeah.
I want to just go back to, you talked a little bit about, that we're all experiencing grief as we've lost these things. What are some good ways, to bring that up and to talk to your kids about that? And because I don't want to put more on them than what they're actually feeling.
Right.
But I know that they're feeling the loss of some of these things. So how do we engage our kids with that conversation?
That's a good question, Betsy. I think for younger kids, maybe even coming up with, depending on the age, coming up with a feeling chart. Having them draw a feeling chart, or we draw a feeling chart as a family together. And then if they don't want, so many kids don't want to talk about it, but if you have them point, like, this is what I'm feeling, like, especially if they're all worked up or behaviorally acting out, like, have them go over and point what they're feeling. But also reassuring that it's okay. Sometimes I'm feeling that too.
Yeah.
And just to try to create this sense of understanding. I don't know if I'm answering your question specifically, but just looking at loss, looking at, this is hard. These are days that we've never had to deal with before like this. But just that reassurance, it's going to be okay. And we love you no matter what. And we want safety and security for our family. And that's a given. That's what we can provide for you right now. And it's going to be okay. So just that reassurance.
Yeah. When we were talking earlier too, you mentioned even just like family dinners and the importance of those during this time. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think before the pandemic, as a therapist, as those that work with kids and families, one of the hardest challenges was to get families to eat together or have a meal together. And because everyone is going here, there, and everywhere, this sporting event, this church event, this PTA meeting or whatever. And now we're all, for the most part, under the same roof at the same time, and people are having meals together again. And I think actually there is a silver lining that it's like, okay, that's a centering place. There are studies that show that families that have family meals together at a structured, specific time, coming together actually reduces anxiety for kids. To kind of get back to your earlier question, that there is that centering time of structure and security. So much of our daily routines with school this time of year, this time last year, has been blown up. But some things that are tried and true is the kind of the rituals that we do in our homes. Kind of, we can push up against those, and those are good things for some of these younger kids to kind of go, okay, we're going to be okay.
Great.
After September 11th, I think we were looking at having kids go back to school, like back to normal reality, like, hey, we're going to be okay. This time we didn't have that. And, it's like, this is ongoing. It's like, well, our home is that safety and security. And that's the routine.
Yeah, in the home, we need to be together, but people need space too.
Yeah.
Because if you're a parent, right, and you've been on all day long,
Yeah,
and you're stuck in the same house,
right.
and where do you find time for yourself? How do you take care of your marriage? We'll talk marriage next week, but
Yeah.
screen time. I mean, I got a million questions here.
Yes, you do.
Technology and everything. So talk to us about all that.
Okay, and then some.
And then some.
I would say it is a cadence. All these questions kind of fold together, but just the idea of there are times where you can create a little bit of a schedule. For younger kids, you might want to use kind of your smart speaker in your home. Like after so many minutes, Alexa or Google will let us know that, it's recess or it's time for us to all come together. But right now we're going to do some alone time where everyone's in their space, or during these next few songs that we play, everyone's going to play some individual play.
Right.
And I'm dealing with all different ages here, but I think our older kids, they're pretty much connected with their device and they're isolating in the room, which is sometimes a blessing because it gives us some alone time, but sometimes a curse because we want them to come out of the cave. We want them to come out of hibernation, and sometimes pulling them out is a bit of a challenge. So then you specifically say it's back to the meal times, or like, we're all going for a walk right now. Yeah, do I have to? Yeah, this is what we're doing. And then you can go back. I think allowing our teens to see through an event, like after we do this, you can get back here. So helping them see through so they can get back to their, whatever their activity is, their TikTok or whatever. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, a lot of TikTok.
I don't know if I answered all that, but just I
Yeah,
think
so you're saying there's being intentional.
being intentional, being purposeful, almost sometimes having a schedule,
Right.
but then sometimes breaking out of that schedule and having some fun. Like, okay, we're doing a family game night right now.
Right.
Or everybody come with their family. You know, this week you get to choose this game. There's something about a game that it causes laughter.
Yeah.
And I think these days we're having a harder time laughing.
Right.
So your question about grief and grieving, sometimes, not that we're not denying the loss, but sometimes we need to laugh again. And so many times we're having right now we're having, with this heaviness, it's like this big weighted blanket on all of us. And it's hard to get out and laugh a little bit. And that creates just some great biochemical things that need to happen to connect, just to laugh again. We haven't been able to do that. So if we're playing a game, or we're doing something where we're having eye contact with each other, or actually emotionally connecting with the person across the table, like a meal time, but also a game time, it's so helpful and so healing during this difficult time of loss.
Yeah, I think for people that like concrete, it's messy, but in a concrete sense, is there a good ratio? How much your high schooler should be out with the family, versus alone time. Is there?
Yeah, I think it would just be nice to see the whites of their eyes, or see if their eye color changed during the day, or at some point, if their skin color's changing because they haven't been outside for a while. I ideally would say a few times each day, making contact. I will purposely, as a dad, go in my kid's room and sit on the floor.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's an excuse just to go see what the dog's doing, because the dog will follow them everywhere. But I'll just go and hang out and see what's going on, and just kind of checking in as to what was the best part of the day, what's going on, what's happening, and just tell me a funny thing that happened today. So just pulling that out a little bit. So we're just real back to your word purposeful, just being very purposeful and intentional to checking in. If they're not coming out, I'm going in. Yeah. So.
Good.
That's good.
Yeah, I'm sure you're getting some questions as well. But
Well, I think I think we've got quite a few junior high, high school, college parents, of those age kids, and so thinking through, those kids are not getting to experience what any of us parents wanted them to experience, at least, high school graduation, college, moving out, and they're not moving out, they're moving back home.
Yeah.
And I've got one of those. So so how do we help them, process and like deal with the fact that they're not getting the college experience we wanted them to have?
Yeah, that is, once again, back to the idea of loss and grieving that loss. I think so much of it at middle school, but more so high school and then on into college, those little developmental shifts or developmental stages that we need to kind of check off our box, especially in this culture, is not happening. It's this concept of arrested development, where that got shut down. What needs to happen hasn't happened. Those students that are going out, we're supposed to go off to college and meet new college friends, and had to even make connections with new college. I met with someone this morning that went away to college in the midst of the pandemic, made it a few weeks and came back, and now reconnecting with high school friends for social connection and outlet, because everybody's back. So it's like what we normally do during Thanksgiving and Christmas when we reconnect with our local friends, everyone is just still here. And so it's a loss, it's a delay. I think building into them the vision for hope, building into that celebration when we actually get to take you to school again, or take you away, or I can see you there, ideally, Lord willing, this time next year. And building into that hope and that vision for them, that we are going to be okay. So I think really leaning in on a vision and an excitement, like we are going to celebrate big time when you're there.
Yeah.
Not merely the fact that you're gone, but just that the fact that I see you there, and I see this is going to happen. And in some ways, maybe that new best friend or new a girlfriend, boyfriend, or whatever is there waiting for you. You just haven't met them yet.
Yeah.
And just that developmental stage.
Yeah.
And so,
But I think that's, a lot of the late high school, early college folks or young adults.
Yeah.
I've heard that a number of times too, where their social world, right, is collapsed, and so they can't even meet people.
No.
And so there's this like hopelessness.
right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I like that though. You give them hope. I can see you there.
Yeah, yeah, just building to that vision and just that excitement that this is everything got a little delayed. I mean, so much of, I think of two circles. It's like our immediate family, the first family. We're as parents, and we're helping them get ready to get in. And so often, middle schoolers, high schoolers, they push into that second circle, which is their second family, their peers, and they're all about their peers. And sometimes more with some of our teens, girls especially, that fractures and they create another circle. Like, I don't like those people anymore and I have new friends. But that they go back and forth between those circles. And right now that second circle has shut down a little bit. And it's hard to push off of one circle to get into the other.
Can you explain that a little more?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Because ideally our home as the first family is so secure and so ideally stable, but also like there are times like, no, these are my friends. This is my new family.
Right.
It's developmentally appropriate for them to find connections. Of course, we're going to offer that and support that ideally, but a lot of there's anxiety like, is it safe for me to hang out with my friends or they've been exposed to COVID and I'm not going to go hang out with them right now. And so that's difficult.
Yeah.
But also developmentally, it's something that needs to happen. So there is a delay there for some of these kids.
And in this time too, there's all these, with social media and with all the social issues. And so people have differing opinions, and there's something about sitting down with someone and having a conversation versus killing each other over social media.
Right. Yeah.
I think it's really happening with young people.
Yeah.
Like it's really hard to they don't have that space.
Right.
So how do they navigate? Okay, as a parent, how do we help them navigate like the social media realm? And
Oh, good.
it's a tough place to be. That's where all the friends are.
Right. And I mean, boys, some girls are doing like the chat on gaming. And so they have the chat or Discord or whatever they're doing, that sort of a chat to kind of connect. In some ways, we want to allow some of that, ideally monitor it at some level too, depending on the age and the stage of the kid. So you want to offer that for them. And you're right, ideally, they're missing out on being in person with some of these kids. And some of our kids are touching base and making connection, ideally safely. But it is limited and it is difficult. You want to allow for that. You want to also know that they're probably not having that emotional connection that they once were having. So there is that loss and it is a challenge. But you want to also maybe sometimes encourage that.
Right.
So I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think so.
Well, I'm going to piggyback on that
Please.
because we've got somebody here who's saying how many hours a day outside of school is appropriate for preteen and teenagers to be on electronic devices?
Oh gosh, it's so different for everyone. Especially back to the idea of some, that's their only social connection, and some need to get off of it and unplug. We were talking earlier about sometimes just everyone turning in their phone at a certain time of the day, or like everyone's phone goes to bed. So depending on the hour or the age, excuse me.
Yeah.
And then, I wish I had the right formula. I think the younger they are, they need to be off of social media or gaming or electronics. I mean, they are on, I remember about a year and a half ago, school districts were sending out a letter to say we need to curtail screen time for students. The kids are on too much. And now, uniquely enough, they're instructing us how to deal with screens. Like that's how school is done now.
Right.
Like they're on screens now. So what a difference a year and a half makes. Where screen. So back to the heaviness and the tiredness, our screen time is getting overused, and so you want to give them a break. Eyes are not doing well with a lot of these screens. The blue light is not user-friendly after a certain hour. It keeps our kids awake. It stimulates the brain, much like the sunlight. Our bodies seem to think it's time to wake up.
Yeah. Is there a time that phones should be down before
Oh, yeah,
sleep?
good question. Yeah, to answer that. So I would say ideally, and I'm reading like American Pediatrics, are saying basically that 1 or 2 hours before bedtime is probably helping to settle the brain down, especially the blue light influence.
Okay.
My teenage kids will say, well, they're Apple phones. They don't have to do the blue light feature. There's all ways around it. But ideally, we're settling it down a little bit so everyone's getting, I so look at with kids, their sleeps and their eats. Like, how are they sleeping at night? How many hours are they getting? Is that consistent sleep? Are their friends texting them, messaging them, DMing them during the night to wake them up? And then also, so I just want to make sure they're getting a consistent level of sleep. And that's so needed, especially at any stage, for teens more.
Yeah.
And then also, what's their eating habits like? What's going in?
That's a big one too. 'Cause
Yeah.
You're sitting at home all day.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
You're bored. And,
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That I don't have a question there. I'm just letting you know.
Well, I had to think of, like, just last week, I had to crack up what things were broken in my house. It was the refrigerator door. It was the printer, because everybody's printing stuff off, and it was the toilet. And, like, these are the things that are breaking in houses right now.
Yeah.
And I had to smile, like, okay, this is what we're fixing right now. This is our new reality, because everyone's here, and these are the things that are getting used.
Right.
Yeah.
What are some of the best things, best practices? You talked about family dinner. Conversation on the phone with you. You talked about the hats, which I loved for teaching.
Yeah, let me talk about that for a second. So I think for some parents, it's especially with younger kids, it's wearing multiple hats of being a teacher and also being a parent. And I've actually literally had some parents get 2 different hats, so kids can see that right now mom or dad are the teachers, and then now they're parent. And then ultimately, weekend, ideally, we're just taking off all hats and just having a good time. But just to differentiate the two, like this is, and then, deputizing, having the teacher deputize the parent that they're my teacher at home.
Right.
And having the parent say, I work for your teacher right now. So.
Yeah.
So literally wearing a hat.
A teacher hat, yeah. Okay. And just like, it's symbolic, but it's just the idea of like, this is what I'm doing. I'm setting the table for you to do your schoolwork right now during this time, or homework, or whatever it is. I have to report back to your teacher. And I really want for parents to have that communication with the teacher. To say, hey, this is not easy. We're having some power struggles here.
Yeah.
I'm going to piggyback on
Please.
that question. We did have somebody ask, like, as teachers, like, how do we help parents and or the kids that are in our classrooms that are showing up on our Zoom screens? Like, how do we help them during this time?
Yeah, as a teacher, I would say just being an encouragement to the parents to say, hey, I know it is hard, and this is messy, and you didn't sign up for this.
Yeah.
None of us signed up for this period of time, but we're doing it. Dallas Willard talks about God exists when we're at our end of our rope. He's there hanging out. And I think most teachers and parents are at the end of our ropes right now, and just back to this heaviness. And I think the idea of just that encouragement, like, where it's going to be okay. Right. I was talking to one of my college roommates this weekend, and he's a 6th grade teacher down in Orange County. And he said they're doing it a little differently than Lucia Mar is. But the students will go to school half the day, and then the next half the day, so some are online during that period of time, and then the next half the day, the other students come in, and the ones that were there in the morning go back online. And he's saying the ones that show up in the afternoon are basically crashed, dead, tired, and sleeping, falling asleep on their desk. Everyone is so tired. So it's just the idea of like, hey, we're all going through it. We're tired. This is getting old, and we don't know how much longer this is going to last. But just that support, like, hey, we're all in this together. Let's focus on this.
Yeah.
And this is a little bit better than it was yesterday. I think every day we look at incremental shifts. Like today was a little bit, let's do this a little bit more, and that's a little bit more than what we did yesterday.
Right.
That's good. Yeah.
I'm sure, as parents, we're feeling the exact same thing. So as parents, what are some practices? What are some things that we need to be mindful of for ourselves as we navigate our kids?
I think just realizing that we're all in this together, we need support, and I think there maybe is an idea here to kind of create some sort of level of support for parents.
Yeah.
and connecting. I think just connecting with other parents, just the realization that we're going to normalize this. We're all in it together.
Right.
Best practices would be just that support. Best practices would be taking those breaks for ourselves. Like husband and wife, next week we'll talk more about this, but husband and wife getting some time away.
Right.
Or inviting everybody else to come out, and then that time it's probably okay for our kids to hang out in their room and say, okay, see you. We're going to get some time. Right. Or walks, listening to music, plugging in. I'm going to say now it's okay for parents to plug in, but just plugging into some ear pods and walking around the house, listening to a podcast or some music, just to take that purposeful break and letting the little ones, especially now, because sometimes they might panic, like, oh, I want you. But like for this period of time, I'm going to take a little break because mom needs that time. And I think it's great modeling for our kids to see that it's okay to take breaks and we're going to be okay.
Right.
Yeah, great. I think that's all the questions on here, but I think there was another one that we had ahead of time. We kind of answered part of it, the teenager dealing with online school, and not being able to participate in activities. And that was kind of the grief process and just acknowledging the losses and
Right.
Yeah.
anything else.
I
on that?
think to add to that would be really trying to understand what they're feeling and just reflecting back, not, I'm going through it too, but reflecting back and saying, yeah, that is rough. That's really hard and that does hurt. And just being present with them and reflecting back to what's going on. I think so often as parents, we just rip on into our next thought.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, just be present with them and just trying to understand where they're at with that. Also, maybe making up some idea, not to compensate. I think we have to be ever so careful not to overcompensate. Like, well, you lost this, so we're going to give you this, or we're going to do this even bigger and better. But just the idea of like, hey, can we do something here? What idea would you have? Or can we make something special for you this next week? Or what idea would you have?
Yeah.
So just kind of creating a new idea or a new tradition for them.
Another one here is, how do you get your teenagers into God even when the parent is very faithful, going to church, praying, but they don't want anything to do with church or praying?
Ben?
Yeah, that's a tough. I mean, growing up, it was pretty. I was a pastor's kid. It's like you go to church. It wasn't an option. But I don't do that with my kids because I think it created something in me that felt rebellious, and it was an invitation, just the same way you minister to anyone else. I mean, you're inviting them into your world, and there are some boundaries, like Betsy, you were talking about, you gave your kids a choice.
Yeah. Well, my kids were teenagers, and they're both introverted, and so being in groups was hard for them. So we said, you have to be at church once a week, whether that's on Sunday morning church or whether that's going to youth group. And my daughter would choose Sunday morning. Youth group was not her thing. And so we gave them a choice, but it was like once a week, as long as you're living in our home, you have to, that's part of what we do.
Yeah.
And so, I think that helped, and, just that we were consistent, that, Sundays that we were at church. And so they knew that was what we do.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And we do the same thing where it's an invitation, but it's kind of a low hanging fruit of I had to talk with one of my kids the other day and said, you put all this other stuff into your head and you're on social media, you're watching movies, whatever it is. And at some level, we know that what we put into our minds really affects us. And so we need those spaces for healthy practices, and whether you're doing your own devotionals or you're having a Bible study together or praying together or saying you're going to serve at church on Sunday, whatever it is, like there has to be some kind of steady diet of health when it comes to spiritual formation. So, that's where you just kind of lay the law down a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. And I think too, then a piece of that really is serving. I think if you can get your kids serving in some way at church. They have some ownership. They feel like, oh, like I'm needed, I'm wanted there.
Yeah.
And that helps too.
Well, that also helps in a weird sort of way, God sort of way. It helps with the anxiety because as we're plugging into the lives of other people,
Yes.
it's not a slam dunk for all anxiety, but just the idea of like we're getting the eyes off ourselves and we're giving back and investing in others that are. It gives perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is such a purposeless, hopeless time.
Yes.
Gives you purpose
Yeah.
when you're thinking about I'm ministering to someone else. I'm caring for somebody else. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is cool because at our church we're doing outdoor kid services, and so we're inviting high schoolers and college age students to come serve and
awesome. Yeah.
take care of little kids, and it helps give them some purpose throughout the week, and
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that the other part of that question was looking at the prayer part, like they're not to stop praying. I mean, just that softening of the heart. And I think so much like back to the circles, like that other circle, that there could be some friends or there could be some other connection that would be that influence as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's great. A question about boys, raising boys.
Oh, boys.
So how do you discipline boys, but do it in a fair, firm, but I think there's a tension there. Boys are so physical and active, and anyway, that was the question.
I think consistency is key. I think so often we can look at all these resources and parenting books and all this. I once had a parent bring in a whole basket of books and say, none of these work, and they slammed it on the table. And I think the key is being consistent and also learning all boys are different, all kids are different, what their special bent is and what is their motivator and what's going to help them. Discipline, I love the word, but it sounds so harsh, but it comes from the root to disciple.
Yeah.
To ultimately help them become more Christ-like, breathing Christ into their life. And so I think that is just our focus sometimes when we look at our kids, is like boys and girls, like how can I best show Christ to them in the midst of just being consistent and trying to help them.
And that sounds like a fantastic parenting strategy. I mean, if you're going to have a vision for parenting, because a lot of us, we get married to have kids, and we're not really thinking about what's the purpose. We think it'll make us happy, but when someone comes into your office and they feel like they're in crisis or they're stuck, I mean, what are you trying to help them see as a parent?
That it's going to be okay. First and foremost, that we're going to be okay. I mean, I think so many, back to your idea of just first starting, you don't know, and it's like, okay, I've never done this before. Or I've never worked with a child like this. I've had 2 other siblings of theirs, and they're great, or they're different. And this one's presenting a challenge. And so I think as parents, we look at such insecurity. And then the idea of like, what is my security? What do I know to be true? What is work? And sometimes we're going to work a little differently with that kid. But ultimately coming alongside and learning their special bent and kind of what's going to make that work for them. I think of the mathematic formula in my mind, it sounds algebraic, but just the R plus R equals P. And I think it especially with our teens and high schoolers, it's the respect plus responsibility equals privilege. And the idea of you're working on respect, and let's talk about that. What does that mean? And it's an adult word, but what is that kind? Being kind, being helpful in the family. So boys sometimes internalize or they'll act out. But like, how can you be more respectful when things don't go the way you want them? And I think we're all going through times right now where these are things we don't want. But how can we get along? Because we're all on top of each other. And then the responsibility. What are your things that you need to do right now? School. That's probably most important for some of them. Or following through with the jobs in the house. And then that you add those things, $100 plus $100, not that we're paying them this, but then you pump it through the equal sign, it's the privilege. It's like what they get out of it. And I'll have kids like say, okay, well, how do you think you're doing this? How do you think you're doing this? And how are you doing with the privileges? And they're like, I'm getting A's in the privileges. Like, so you're telling me that you're getting an F in this and F in this, but so F plus F equals A. And so sometimes we have to kind of bring down those privileges a little bit to kind of clue it in and like, okay, I have to do something over here, do the work over here to get this stuff.
Right.
Sometimes it gets flipped.
That's good.
Yeah, that's
Respect plus responsibility
Equals privilege.
That's good.
Yeah.
Have you seen a rise in like disrespect?
Good question.
Because I know if I would have spoke to my dad the way maybe some of my kids speak to me, I'm like, and I've heard other parents say that many times. We're like, what's going on? Is it social media? Is it?
I think it's all the above. I wish there was one thing I can say. There it is.
Yeah.
I think there is such discourse right now. I think our culture right now is very argumentative. If it's chatter online, like I disagree with that, or it is somebody just wanting this outlet because we've been cooped up for a while.
Right.
So it's like, let's full blast. I'm going to go off on you in the grocery store line.
Right.
So I think kids are picking up on some of this too.
Right.
But I think it's pulling it back to kindness.
Right.
Pulling it back to what can we do to work on this a little bit more.
Right.
And then kind of doing a game plan for them. Like, okay, sometimes it's morning, noon, and night, like when we do prayers. It's like, okay, let's work on this goal. Like, how are you doing? Like, this is our goal today.
Right.
And then noon, how are you doing? Little check-in. And then at night, how do you think you did? And what could go better tomorrow?
Right.
It's purposely looking at that and helping them work on those.
Yeah. And how would you help kids be kind? I mean,
Well, I think catch them, especially if it's with a friend or if they're having a connection. Like, look at that.
Right.
Like, not embarrassing them, but just like, I really like the way you handle that, or the way you said something to your mom right now, or your sibling. Like, that was pretty impressive. That is kind.
so the positive reinforcement.
Yeah, the positive, and because we're going to be more motivated when
Right.
there's a positive connection and they're able to resonate instead of
Right.
you can't do that or no, you can't do that. And some of that is important, but it's like the correction. If the correction is coming from a positive place of something they're already doing,
Right.
they're going to have more strides in making it work.
Right. That's good. That's really good.
I was thinking, we have a few with little ones on here, and I was reflecting back to when my kids were little. I was super worried about their food intake, like what they would eat and what they would not eat, and all of that. And I remember our pediatrician telling us, like, don't worry about what they eat in a day. She's like, think about over the week, what they've eaten in a week. And if they had some green vegetables during the week,
We're good.
we're good.
Yeah.
And I think in a way that can apply to a lot of things in parenting. I think we can get so stuck on a day, like what's happened today in my kid's life. And if we just kind of zoom out a little bit, and especially as they're getting older, and like the goal, for me, our goal in parenting was, that our kids are going to become independent and good citizens and love Jesus. Like that's our goal for our kids. And so, thinking long term in our parenting instead of and we're focused in on this time because it's so stressful and all of that. But having a little bit of a longer lens to look through. I mean, I liked how you said, even with kids, giving them a vision for a little bit further in the future. So they're not so focused on today.
Yeah, and I think even if I can piggyback on that, back to the analogy of what buttons to push, I think as a parent, it's hard for us not to push the fast forward button and go, oh my gosh, if they eat this, what's going to happen? Or are they going to create this bad habit? Or are they going to, have health issues in their future? It's like, okay, let's look at pushing play, or to kind of like what you're saying, and like, okay, for right now, for this week, they're doing pretty darn good. Or I got a vegetable in them, or they got outside and experienced some vitamin D in the sun, and they were able to go for a walk. And motion and movement is so big right now, and it's getting our kids out, and the launching is big too. But for the younger ones, it's hard, and sometimes they have just limited choices, like one or two favorite things, and they're bound and determined that's all they're going to eat. And there's not a lot of green in some of those choices. And that's okay, I think, at some point, introducing some new things, making it an adventure, like, whoa, we're going to do this today. So making it fun.
And you seem to have such a kind of a long game perspective. You said it a lot. You said it to me, it's going to be okay. And that feels great. And I'm like, I like that attitude. But then we get sucked back into this like, if they develop this habit, or if they don't do this, they're going to end up on the streets or whatever.
Sure.
How are there hills that are worth dying on? And if so, which ones?
Oh my gosh. Oh gosh.
I mean, yeah, a little junk food, whatever, a little extra screen time, but what are the things that we should be really aware where you'd say, yeah, I would definitely watch out for that?
I would go back to kind of what we were talking about earlier as to the kindness, the respect, the responsibility, just having them have some sort of discipline. There's that word again, a discipline of being kind, discipline and focus on being responsible.
Right.
And having that balance of not necessarily on the other end feeling always entitled.
Right.
To like, I deserve this. This is the way I need to be. This is I've been ripped off here, and you will pay.
Right.
Then it becomes. I think the key is, and with God's help, creating that empathy and that sympathy of seeing somebody else's challenges and hardships, and you know, obviously God's working on the heart in some of our kids, but some of those just allowing God the opportunity to work,
Right.
and just opening that up. But yeah, those are probably the ones that that I'm pretty bound and determined. Like, come on, we got to at least do these.
Right. Yeah. Let's say you have, 2 kids, 3 kids, 4 kids, whatever, but one of the kids seems to be angrier, less kind than the other one.
Yeah.
How do you handle that kid that is not kind almost ever?
Oh, yeah. That's a hard one. I would once again highlight the times that he is, or highlight allowing, like we're all watching Netflix or all looking at books right now, pulling out the shows that, and it's called a projective technique in my realm, where you're really talking about them, but they're looking at somebody else on the screen.
Okay.
And you try to create this ability, or they're looking at somebody else in a book, but it's like, oh, this is you. Well, what do you think about this kid and how he's treating this other kid?
Right.
And what is that like? Like, what do you think you're not talking about them, but what do you think it's like for them? Being mistreated. And so you pull it out of a book or a children's storybook and try to create that empathy, or have them have that empathic understanding of what's going on in a certain scenario.
So you might literally be watching a movie
Absolutely.
and ask, what do you think that kid's feeling right now?
Yeah. And I used to do this. I used to work in a hospital setting with kids, and I would, and they knew going in, I'm going to pause it at some points to ask you some questions just to make sure. And they're like, oh, come on. I want to see the rest. I'm like, well, what's going on? And they would have them, or what do you think is going to happen? Or what would happen if this? So you have them tell you the rest of the story, but it's really like kind of what's going on in their heart and what's that like. So trying to build in that empathy.
Okay.
And then I think it's unfortunate right now, but our kids aren't really socializing much.
Right.
But sometimes it's helpful when we do go back to school is to get that input from other friends, families, teachers. What are they seeing with our kids? Are they doing that in other settings? Often is not the case. Like, your child is the greatest. I want 1,000 of them. Like, what? Like for some parents, they tell me that all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
I always thought that was really cool. Like, one of my favorite things was taking groups of students in the inner city or San Francisco, Mexico, and you'd watch them serve. You'd watch them build a house or
it's
wash
so good.
someone's feet.
Yeah,
and then,
it's so powerful.
yeah, it's amazing. And parents come back, see pictures, like, my kid did that.
Yeah.
They cleaned the bathrooms. Or they volunteered. There's something awesome. Like, I wish sometimes I could see my own kids through those eyes, because when they're your own kids, it's kind of catastrophic.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So it's a good perspective. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Excellent.
Look forward to those things happening again, where we can get out and do some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We'll be wrapping up in a couple minutes, but
Okay.
if there's any other questions that are coming up at all.
Yeah, no,
or
I think we
we're okay?
we answered the ones that people asked. So
Good.
yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else you have for us? Any more advice or?
I really want to, I guess, breathe courage into the parents that are doing this during this difficult time. The idea of courage and being an encouragement to say, we're all in it together. This is thick. This is rough. This is historical. It's kind of what our great-grandparents, our grandparents would talk about, like the Depression years. Like, this is epic. This is historical. This is like, how did you make it? This is what our kids are going to look at and talk about in a good sort of way.
Yeah.
But just like, hey, we hung in there. We were all in it together, and we're we're there for each other. And with God's help, we made it work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too, because if you have grandparents or parents
Yeah.
that grew up in the Depression, you
Yeah.
kind of know like they saved everything.
Right.
They didn't
Oh,
let
yeah.
anything go to waste. And you're like, oh, they're from the Depression era.
Yep.
I wonder what the pandemic
Yeah,
era. is
we have
gonna
no
be.
idea what they're
Yeah.
going to look at and just our behaviors as a culture
Yeah.
during this time.
Yeah.
We're going to look back and do studies on that.
And it's worldwide.
It is.
Yeah.
It's worldwide. That's what's so different.
It
Yeah,
is very different. Yeah, uncharted territory.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's going to be okay.
It's going to be okay. We're making it, not knowing where we are in the grand scheme of things,
Yeah.
but it's one day at a time.
One day at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the encouragement, one day at a time. Thank you, Brent.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate it. Well, a couple of resources.
Yeah.
If you are watching this at a later time too.
Yeah, for
We
sure.
got some really good resources. There's a ton of good resources you can find everywhere. The hardest thing is finding the right ones.
Right.
There's more than we can handle. So Brent gave us some of his favorites that he likes to give me. We put some of our favorite resources for parents.
Yep.
And how do they access that?
It'll be a link. Haley just shared it there, but it'll also be right below this video wherever it's posted on our Facebook. It'll be on our Facebook. It'll be on YouTube. It'll be on our website on the Foundations page. And I just wanted to highlight just a couple of them. The Sticky Faith, I think he's going to put these up on the screen maybe, but the Sticky Faith Guide for Your Family and the Sticky Faith book by Kara Powell. Those are really good. We also have Spiritual Parenting. We've done a class here with this book. It's really good and helpful, so that would be another one. And then this has become my lifeline, the Doing Life with Your Adult Children. And I love the subtitles, Keep Your Mouth Shut and the Welcome Mat Out. So that one, if you've got adult children, I highly recommend that one. There's also some apps on there. And the ParentQ app, I love this app, although it makes me very sad. I've only got my youngest son is the only one that can be on the app because he's under 18. And it tells me every week how many weeks I have left with him in my home before he kind of launches out on his own, hopefully. And it gives me some great verses, some great topics to talk to him about, and it's all geared toward whatever age your kid is. So from birth all the way to up to 18, you can put your kids in there, and it tells you how many weeks old they are. It's a neat app. So
Right.
encourage that one.
And we're also going to be launching some support groups. If we have enough people that want these, we want the groups are an important part of our church and our discipleship strategy. And so we'll, let us know. Let Betsy know if you would be interested in being in a parent support group or hosting a parent support group, leading one, facilitating one, and how do they let you know that?
There is, I think Haley's going to put it in the chat. There's going to be a form that you would fill out, and we're just saying it's going to be 4 weeks. We'll do 4 weeks parent support. Would love to get you involved in that, and then we'll go from there. But we're going to offer this for this week, and then next week we're going to talk about marriage, and we'll do some marriage groups as well. So.
Yeah, and if you have questions, if you're going to tune back in next week, we're going to do this with Brent again. Deals with marriage, and let us know your questions about marriage, and we're going to try to tackle some of these same questions, same format, and the hope is that you would be encouraged, know that it's going to be okay. Jesus is Lord. Absolutely. We're going to get through this together. So God bless you, and wherever you are tonight, or if you're watching this another day, take care.
way for all to see. You are light, you are light. When the darkness closes in, you are hope, you are hope. You have covered all my sin. You are peace, you are peace. When my fear is crippling, you are true, you are true. Even in my wandering, you are joy, you are joy. You're the reason that I sing. You are life, you are life. In you death has lost its sting. Kiddo, I'm running to your arms, I'm running to your arms. The riches of your love will always be enough. Nothing compares to your embrace. Light of the world, forever reign. Sing you all. You are more than my words will ever say. You are Lord, all creation will proclaim. You are here, in your presence I'm made whole. You are God, of all else I'm letting go. I'm running to your arms, I'm running to your arms. The riches of your love will always be enough. Nothing compares to your embrace. Light of the world, forever reign. I'm running to your arms, I'm running to your arms. The riches of your love will always be enough. Nothing compares to your embrace. Light of the world, forever reign. My heart will sing, no other name. My heart will sing, no other name. Jesus, Jesus. My heart will sing, no other name. Jesus, Jesus. Nothing compares to your embrace. Light of the world, forever reign. I'm running to your arms, I'm running to your arms. The riches of your love will always be enough. Nothing compares to your embrace. Light of the world, forever reign. My heart will sing, no other name. Jesus, Jesus. My heart will sing, no other name. Jesus, my heart will sing. No other name, Jesus.
these pieces, broken and scattered, in mercy gathered, mended and whole, empty-handed, but not forsaken. I've been set free. I've been set free. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Ooh, I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Oh, I can see now. Oh, I can see the love in your eyes, laying yourself down, raising up the broken to life. You take our failure, you take our weakness, you set your treasure in jars of clay. So take this heart, Lord, I'll be your vessel, the world to see your life in me. Oh, amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Ooh, I once was lost, but now I am found. Was blind, but now I see. Oh, I can see it now. Oh, I can see the love in your eyes, laying yourself